What's up everyone, Pritch here bringing you a guide on everything Musket in New World. First we're going to go over basic attacks, second we're going to go over all the weapon abilities, upgrades, and passives that can be spec'd into for both the Sharpshooter and Trapper trait lines. Finally, we're going to cover potential builds and fun weapon combos to try out. Let's get it going. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the go-to weapon for everyone that gave up on hitting shots with a bow, the Musket. The Musket scales off dexterity, so the more damage you want to do, the more dexterous you gotta spec. The Musket also has secondary scaling with intelligence. Before going over the easiest basic attacks in the game, I want to let you guys know that the Musket I was using had a perk called Keen Speed, which gave me a 30% haste for 2 seconds when I crit, and this had an internal cooldown of 10 seconds, so when you see me popping random haste all the time, it's because of this perk. Also, just like in my previous videos, my crits deal roughly 130% damage. Now the Musket has the simplest auto attacks to understand because there's only one attack and it does 100% weapon damage. The kicker to the Musket is that it has a reload time where you have to put another bullet in the chamber, and after testing, I can confidently tell you that the reload time is exactly 2 seconds. By this, I just mean that if you mash the shoot button between your first and second attack, it will take exactly 2 seconds for your gun to fire again. While the Musket only has one basic attack, it can be fired in a multitude of ways. You can aim down the sight and fire, you can hip fire, you can fire while crouching, and you can even fire while laying down. Now aiming down the sight or firing prone will give you the best accuracy, while hip firing on the run will grant you the worst accuracy. But I gotta say, even hip fire is pretty stinking accurate. For those wondering, the accuracy meter is the 2 little tiny dashes to the side of your hit marker. The closer they are to the marker, the more accurate you're going to be, while the farther away they get, the more varied your shots could be. Auto attacks done, let's move on to the DPS elite that knows you're here to play a sniper, Sharpshooter. The first weapon ability is Power Shot. Load blue into your gun, and the next attack you do will do 150% weapon damage. This sits on a 14-second cooldown, and this is one of the Musket's many overload shots. All overload shots work the same way, so I'm going to explain the mechanics they all share really fast. All overload shots load a color into your musket that enhances your next attack. None of these shots can stack together, but all of them have their cooldown initiated the moment the gun gets loaded, not when you fire it. This means that you can preload an overload shot, then if you wait long enough, you can fire the shot, then immediately load the same shot back in for back-to-back effects. Final note on overload shots, the bullet remains in the musket even when you weapon swap and then come back to the musket. TLDR, always preload an overload shot. The first upgrade is Initial Engagement. Get a 10% damage boost for 5 seconds after landing Power Shot. You're going to have enough time to get 2 attacks in during those 5 seconds. The second upgrade is First Blood. Get a 10% damage boost against targets with full health. For those wondering why I have a 10% damage boost from First Blood that lands for 787 damage, then immediately have a 10% damage boost from Initial Engagement that lands for 774 damage, I highly recommend checking out my video for how damage works as I explain the difference and how those damage amplifiers get applied differently. The final upgrade is Bullseye. Headshots reduce this cooldown by 15%, which will knock off around 2.1 seconds for a total of around 11.9 seconds. Next up, Powder Burn. Load orange into your gun, and the next shot you do does 110% weapon damage and applies a 9-second burn that deals 20% weapon damage each second, totaling 180% weapon damage over 9 seconds. And when combined with the initial shot damage, this ability will do a grand total of 290% weapon damage over 9 seconds. This all sits on a 14-second cooldown and is an overload shot, which means that it can't stack with other shots and can be stored in muskets, which will initiate the ability cooldown. If you utilize a powder burn into another powder burn before the burn ticks fall off, you will not do 2 ticks of burn damage at once. It will reset the burn stacks to 9 seconds, which means that you'll actually lose damage overall if you stack powder burn shots before the burn ticks expire. The first upgrade is Backdraft. Your normal basic attacks do 12% additional damage to enemies with burn ticks. Since you can reload every 2 seconds, in theory you can get off 4 shots here. Chronic Trauma. If Powder Burn is a headshot, the burn lasts for 13 seconds, which means that you do 260% weapon damage over the 13 seconds for a total of 370% weapon damage over 13 seconds. It also means that you have enough time to land 6 basic attacks to take advantage of Backdraft here. This is a really powerful ability and it really shines in PvP. The final weapon ability is Shooter Stance. Kneel down and focus. While in this stance, you can fire up to 3 bullets, and each bullet will do 100% weapon damage, which is the exact same as a normal attack, but your reload time is reduced by 75%, meaning it takes you half a second to reload your gun. This means instead of taking 4 seconds to shoot 3 bullets, it's going to take you 1 second. But unfortunately, that's only true when tooltips don't lie. In reality, the reload time was reduced by 50% because I went from a 2-second reload between shots to a 1-second reload between shots. A 50% reduction is still really nice and feels really great, but don't you tempt me with a sexy 75% and then under-deliver. This all sits on an 18.7 second cooldown, and you can enter and exit the stance whenever you want, and the ability will not go on cooldown unless you've shot at least 1 shot. Once the first shot is fired, the moment you exit the stance, the ability will go on cooldown. You can't move in the stance, but you can exit by repressing the ability or just dodge rolling. The first upgrade is Shoot More, because Amazon was too busy creating fake tooltips to come up with upgrade names. Shoot 5 bullets instead of 3. This means that you can go from doing 500% weapon damage in 8 seconds to 500% weapon damage in 4 seconds. That's some really solid damage, especially when we aren't even considering any amplifiers or headshot crits. Before moving on to the next upgrade, can I just ask, what the heck happened to my third shot? Where did that go? My cursor never moved, but for some reason my third shot did no damage and didn't hit register. What? Maybe Amazon felt bad for Mike and wanted to ease his suffering a bit? I don't know. The final upgrade is Marksman. If you land 3 shots in a row during Shooter Stance, your other cooldowns get reduced by 25%. And yes, all 3 shots have to occur during Shooter Stance. Overall, it's a really strong PvE ability, and I've seen some really cool interactions in PvP where people trap their opponents, then immediately Shooter Stance and land a couple headshots. On to the passives. Critical Reload. Landing 3 headshots within 5 seconds of each other grants an instant reload. I'm pretty confident you do not have to land 3 headshots within 5 seconds. I'm pretty sure you land 1 headshot, then you have 5 seconds to land headshot number 2, then once that lands, you have 5 seconds to land headshot number 3. Unfortunately, I do not know if they have to be consecutive or if you can hit a body shot between headshots and still proc the passive, so that's going to be something to just keep your eyes peeled for, and if anybody knows, just let me know in the comments. Called Shot. Get a 5% damage increase if you aim down the sight for more than 3 seconds. This comes with a really cool animation where your gun starts to glow blue, then flares up right at 3 seconds to indicate that it's been 3 seconds. Greater Accuracy. Accuracy penalty while hip firing removed. Remember the accuracy penalty, which is indicated by the little white lines to the side of your hit marker? Well, those things showcase how much you might miss by, and this is increased when you hit fire instead of ADS. With this passive, your shots are all extremely accurate now, and will fire wherever your hit marker is, even when hip firing. Empowering Headshot. Hitting a headshot grants Empower for 5 seconds, which increases damage by 10% for 5 seconds. It appears that landing multiple headshots will have absolutely no effect and won't even reset the timer back to 5 seconds. Once a headshot is hit, you have 5 seconds of Empower, and once that ends, then you can land another headshot to reapply the Empower. Since you have 5 seconds, this means that you have 2 shots to take advantage of this buff. Ballistic Advantage. Remove damage fall off from musket shots hitting targets over 50 meters away. Well, alrighty then. That means there's damage fall off with distance for ranged attacks in New World. I don't know the exact science of it, but I hit Mike a few times, then I backed up a little bit and I'd hit him again, and I'd lose like 2 damage for each meter for however far apart we would get past 50 meters. Then I put the passive on, and every shot was landing for the normal 368. So I think for anyone wanting to snipe your targets from range, this is going to be a pretty strong passive. Called Shot Resupply. All your basic musket attack headshots reduce your cooldowns by 10%. I can't believe I didn't check this, but I don't know if headshots hit in shooter stance will proc this. Please forgive me. Heightened Precision. Aiming down the sight grants a 2.5% damage increase for each shot hit, which maxes out at 6 stacks for a 15% DPS boost, which can be enjoyed from the 7th shot on. This stacking bonus immediately goes away if you haven't hit a shot for 5 seconds, or you let go of aiming down the sight. Now for you math wizards out there, this effect shows up on your buff bar, which means that we're going to be treating this like Empower, even though the tooltip doesn't explicitly call it Empower. Each new stack will be additive with the previous stack. If you stop aiming down the sight for a split second, this buff will remove itself and you're going to have to start all over again. Hit your mark. Your crits deal increased damage the farther the target is from you for a max of 15% at 100 meters. I don't know if this works in a linear fashion, but if so, that means you gain 0.15% increased damage for each meter apart between you and your target. Now for the math nerds like me. Trust me, I get it. It says that it increases critical hit damage, but it doesn't actually increase your critical hit value. You literally just treat this like a regular damage increase, and for those that watched my damage video, it's literally just going to be part of your Part B calculations. Why they worded this way in the tooltip is beyond me. I just know that it actually has nothing to do with your crit values. Now, this ability does not forego damage falloff, which simply means damage falloff will still apply to these shots unless you have the ballistic advantage passive. When I put damage falloff back on and shot Mike at 100 meters, I hit for 411 damage, which is exactly 75% of the damage I did with no falloff. This means that at 100 meters, your damage is reduced by 25%, which is just a cool thing to keep in the back of your mind. And if damage fall off is linear, this means that the damage starts to fall off at 50 meters, and every 2 meters past 50, you're going to lose 1% damage. Finally, we have the Sharpshooter Elite, Sniper. Get an optional 3x zoom when you aim down the sight, and get a 15% damage increase to all headshots. Unfortunately, I don't have any footage of the 3x zoom, but suffice to say, it's going to help you snipe kids, and who doesn't love a 15% DPS boost? That finishes the Sharpshooter trait line. To recap, all your abilities do really amazing damage. You get a lot of damage and cooldown reduction for hitting headshots. You gain increased damage with sniping things far away from you, and your elite gives you a sniper scope zoom and even more headshot damage. Alright everybody, mid-round break. I just want to apologize, I'm still pretty sick, so I know you guys aren't getting like 100% of that normal Pritch charm in the video, but I'm getting better, getting through it, so hopefully by the next videos you should be clearing up and should be back to normal. I have now passed 2,000 subs on YouTube, which is crazy to me. Like, the support and love that you guys have given me in the community, thank you. I appreciate it so much. And if you guys aren't already, feel free to go hit that like button, that sub button, join the rallying cause of building up this channel. It's really amazing to see, and I feel really blessed because of it. Thank you guys. Thank you. Let's get going. Next up, we have the Survivalist trait line stocked with CC application. Trapper. The first weapon ability is Traps. Throw a small bear trap that lasts for 20 seconds, and if an enemy walks over it, they get rooted for 3 seconds. This sits on an 18.7 second cooldown, and while the hitbox is pretty small, it does feel really impactful when it lands. Like I said earlier, a super fun combo is trapping something straight into a shooter stance and popping headshots while the target can't move. Now you're actually going to throw these traps super far, and they have a funky flight pattern because they actually land to the left of where you aim, so always aim farther to the right from where you want them to land. If you throw a trap and it lands on the feet of your target, that target will instantly get trapped and immobilized, which can be super handy in PvP. The first upgrade is Trapped Damage. Trapped targets get a 20% rend for 3 seconds, which is the same amount of time they are immobilized. Rend reduces the target's resistances, which makes them take more damage. In theory, you're going to be able to get off 2 attacks in this time. A quick note on damage with Rend applications for those that watched my damage video. The Rend decreased Michael's resistances, and this inherently changed our Part A base number value, which means that our new base number value with Mike at a 20% Rend is 446, which makes complete sense when you realize that the crit value did 580 damage. In this particular instance, a 20% rend on Mike resulted in us doing a 21.2% damage increase. The second upgrade is Scent of Blood. Lifesteal all the damage done to trapped enemies. Since the traps only apply for 3 seconds, you better make those 2 shots count. This is a nice little health gain though. The final upgrade is Double Trap. Jesse has joined James and they're making it a double, so now you get 2 traps. You can now throw 2 traps and the cooldown for this ability won't begin until you have thrown the second trap. The same target can be hit with both traps, and if you proc the second trap while the first trap is active, it's just going to reset the root and rend duration. Having 2 traps gives you the ability to zone control enemies a lot better in PvP, and this is an all-around great upgrade. Speaking of PvP, the next ability is Stopping Power. Load purple into your gun, which makes your next shot deal 120% weapon damage, stagger, and knockback 3 meters. This sits on a 16.8 second cooldown, and it's an overload shot, which behaves the exact same as the rest, except this time, it's purple. The first upgrade is Lasting Impression. Targets hit get a 10% exhaust debuff for 8 seconds. Exhaust reduces stamina regen, and while 10% basically does nothing, at least it lasts for 8 seconds, so I'll cut this one a little bit of slack. It's something super small helping in the background in PvP fights. The second upgrade is Supplementary Repulsion. Targets hit get a 10% slow for 8 seconds. I view this in the exact same light as the previous upgrade. I don't think a 10% slow does much of anything, but at least it's for 8 seconds, so it's something that's super small helping in the background. And wait a minute, that's not 8 seconds, you friggin' liars. Maybe Amazon thought there wasn't someone crazy enough to put a timer up and double check their numbers. Both the exhaust and slow clearly only last for 5 seconds, and maybe it's the empty promises, but man, now I think these upgrades suck. Like, come on, I cut these upgrades some slack because they said 8 seconds, and I was like, okay, maybe you want this to be like a super slow, long application for a long time. I can respect that, I get that, but man, give me what was promised. The final ability is Sticky Bomb. Throw a bomb that sticks to whatever it hits, then it detonates 3 seconds later, dealing 175% weapon damage to anything within 3 meters, and this hits on an 11.2 second cooldown. If anyone has ever played Call of Duty, it's literally just a Semtex grenade, and I love it. I think it's super funny, and it feels really cool to land. I don't think it's very strong, I just think it's fun. 3 meters is way too small of a radius, and the damage is kind of mediocre, but hey, it's the Musket's only AoE ability, and it's fun. The tooltip doesn't say this, but the explosion staggers and knocks back enemies hit. The first upgrade is Unflinching Walk. Gain 40 stamina when the bomb explodes as long as you hit something. Enjoy 80% of a free dodge roll. The final upgrade is Sticky Slow. When you stick the bomb to a target, the target gets a 15% slow for the 3 seconds before the bomb blows up. I don't think a 15% slow is super impactful either, but hey, at least it's not a 10% slow. Abilities done, now we're moving on to the passives. First up, Salt on the Wounds. Do 10% more damage to targets below 30% health. I don't know what it is with whoever made the musket, but they were like obsessed with 10%. I swear half these tooltips involve 10% something. Back it up. Amazon says walking strafing movement speed is increased, but normal humans would just say that move speed is increased by 10% when an enemy is within 8 meters of you. Ignore the walking strafing terminology. Whether you're holding down the sight or running to or from a foe, you're going to get a 10% move speed buff. You will know when you have the buff because yellow waves of energy will be shooting off of you to indicate that you're moving super duper fast. Weakened defense. Your basic attacks deal 50 increased stamina damage to enemies blocking with shields, and you gain a 10% armor pen to targets not blocking with a shield. Again, I apologize because I can't find my footage for this ability, and I realize this tooltip could mean like 10 different things. My assumption is twofold. I believe the beginning part is supposed to mean you literally do an additional 50 stamina damage when people block your musket shots with a shield, and remember, a full stamina bar is only 100 stamina, so this is going to be doing more than half a tank stamina bar with one shot. I believe the final part means that you get a flat 10% armor pen to literally any target not blocking your shot, and the only weapon that can block a ranged hit is Sword and Shield. Empowering Weakness. Hitting a target with a debuff gives you a 5% empower for 5 seconds, which is an incredibly small damage increase. Hustle. This is what my wife did to me in Nashville while playing darts, but in New World, gain a 10% haste for 3 seconds after every dodge. You gain 40 stamina back in 3 seconds, which means that you can keep an almost permanent haste uptime just from this one passive. I actually think this is pretty strong, even if it's just a 10% boost. Tactical Reload. Dodging reloads your musket, and this has an internal cooldown of 6 seconds. This will always be faster than waiting the normal 2 seconds to reload, as you can get 2 shots off in around 1 second. Energy Burst. Hitting a debuffed foe restores 5 whole stamina, and I'm going to steal the same joke from the bow video because it's the same passive. Wow. How generous. Getting 5 stamina is about as laughable as a AAA publisher misspelling the word attacking. Kick them when they're down. Get a 10% damage boost versus targets with an active crowd control status effect. Then in parentheses they say slow, root, and stun. And I want you guys to pay close attention to the way they worded this because I do not believe this damage bonus will be applied to knock down foes because being knocked down is not an active CC status effect. AKA, there is no red box showing a debuff. I think this list is exhaustive, and it basically means that you're going to get a 10% damage bonus when hitting someone stuck in your trap for 3 seconds, stuck with a bomb for 3 seconds, or 5 seconds after you hit someone with stopping power. Finally, we have the Trapper Elite, Lethal Combo. Literally, this is a copy and paste identical buff to kick them when they're down, except now it's a 20% damage bonus. You get it from hitting targets affected by trap or tree status effects, which only applies during the 3 seconds someone is trapped, 3 seconds someone has a bomb stuck to them, or 5 seconds after you hit someone with stopping power. Not gonna lie, it kind of feels a little anticlimactic. Like the big bad elite is literally like the exact same buff as the previous passive, except now it's a 20% bonus. And I appreciate the damage bonus. Like 20% is awesome. It's just like, I don't know, it doesn't feel very elite. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on this? Are my expectations too high on how I view elites, or does this also kind of like leave you guys feeling a little wanting, you know? That's going to finish up the trapper tree. To recap, you get traps. You also get Call of Duty Semtex grenades. You can maintain an almost permanent haste uptime, and you do 30% bonus damage to enemies with Trapper Tree status effect. Trait lines done, let's go over some fun builds to try out. As always, there are a plethora of different ways to play New World that require different builds to focus on different roles, so we're going to start with my recommendations for playing the game solo open world, then partied open world, then expeditions, then 1v1 builds, then 50v50 war builds, and then finally, the one build to rule them all for if you want to do everything, but don't want to constantly change your build like me. First up, solo open world. Here, we're valuing big damage, haste, and quick reloads for more shots. The Musket is a single target DPS with okay damage and a lot of range. So the typical playstyle is to open up with your Musket and chuck a target down at range, and then when it gets close to you, it's sitting at like below half health and can easily be finished off by your secondary weapon. Alternatively, if mobs run into your traps and you're landing headshots, you can just outright kill the mobs before they can ever reach you. I recommend bringing Powder Burn as it does great damage over time and it's the highest overall damaging ability. Second is Shooter Stance, which is also a super high damage ability if you land all your shots. Finally, we have your only form of CC in traps. If mobs are targeting you, they tend to run in a pretty straight path and won't avoid traps, so if you place those down before firing, the mobs will get stuck. Little note here, the website I use to show these images is newworldfans.com, and for some reason, it won't let me select double traps, so that's why it says that there's one mastery point available. If you guys just follow the check marks I place for you, you're going to be just fine though. For weapon pairings, the Musket will be your primary ranged weapon, and you won't need a second, so all my recommendations are going to be melee pairings, and for those that watched my bow video, these recommendations are going to be almost identical, since the bow and musket have very similar playstyles. I believe the musket pairs well with rapier, spear, or hatchet. The rapier is a dexterity weapon with extremely high single target DPS, and you can think of it like an extremely mobile glass cannon. This will quickly dispatch any low health targets that make their way to you, and is going to provide you with an excellent source of mobility for getting around to turn them quickly. The spear is also a dexterity weapon, and this provides a strong CC and disengage option. Instead of a quick burst, the spear will give your enemies a ton of CC to the point that they're never going to have a chance to swing at you. Finally, we have the hatchet, which has secondary scaling off dexterity. The hatchet has incredibly high sustain and mobility with great single target DPS. This option is less damage than the rapier and less CC than the spear, but gives you a spammable health regen while still maintaining high DPS. Finally, neither the musket nor the other three options have good AoE cleave for large mobs. As such, my final recommendation is the Great Axe, which is currently the premier AoE cleave weapon in New World. Let the musket pick off mobs, then, when you have a cluster of 3 or more mobs after you, swap to the Great Axe and cleave them all down while taking advantage of its high lifesteal to keep your health topped off. Next, you got a couple buddies and you're roaming around to turn them together for Partied Open World. Here, I recommend a very similar build, except this time, we got rid of traps and we brought Power Shot for more raw damage. I recommend this change for when you have friends that are tanking or holding aggro for you. If mobs aren't running after you, then there's really no need for traps, so we might as well bring more big damage. Your job in the group is going to be really simple. Just do damage and land as many headshots as possible. Remember to try opening with Power Shot for that increased damage, then Powder Burn, then Shooter Stance so that you can take advantage of the 25% reduced cooldowns on your overload shots. For weapon pairings is going to be the exact same 4: Rapier, Spear, Hatchet, and Great Axe. I've already explained the value in each of these, but something I didn't mention is how the Rapier has the exact same scaling as the Musket, where its primary stat is Dexterity, and its secondary is Intelligence, which means that you can gain the most value out of your stats by pairing these two weapons together. Next up, Expeditions, which are 5-man instance dungeons. Here, you're going to be coming in as a DPS role, which is great because in expeditions, bosses' hitboxes aren't big enough for 3 melee classes to take advantage of constant bat critting, so one of the 3 should be playing a ranged class. The build I recommend will be the exact same as Partied Open World because the only thing we care about is damage. Just do as much as humanly possible and land as many headshots as you can. Just remember to not waste damage by reapplying Powder Shot too early. Let those burn ticks go for the full duration before reapplying. For weapon pairings, I'll only be recommending the Rapier and the Spear. The Rapier is the highest single target melee DPS class in New World, and since your job is to do damage, it's a perfect fit. Just be careful with your spacing, because if you pull aggro, you're gonna die really quickly. The Spear provides great damage, but has an even bigger contribution by applying a 30% rend, which can be maintained 100% uptime. Rend reduces the target's resistances and armor, letting your whole party do greatly increased damage, and no other weapon can provide this potent of a rend, making Spear extremely valuable. Moving on to PvP, where the musket can finally start having a chance at outperforming the bow. First up, 1v1s, and here, the musket's actually not a very ideal weapon. The huge advantage of musket is the ease at which you can chip off players' health at a very large range. Typically in 1v1s, you don't have that much space before the fight really starts. You probably only get like 20 to 30 meters at most, and that gap is going to get closed after 1 or 2 musket shots. That said, if you can maintain distance with the help of stopping power and traps, you can get off some great damage with powder burn and a few regular musket hits. In PvP, ignore going for headshots. Just don't do it. You will miss way more shots this way, so just be satisfied with hitting body shots and getting a little bit of chip damage off. For the passives this time around, we're really going to go for the advantage of the status effects that we can apply with traps and stopping power to increase our DPS while still maintaining the haste buffs off dodge rolling. For weapon pairings, my first 2 recommendations are the Rapier and the Spear. The Rapier has the highest ceiling and potential in 1v1 duels with a spammable invulnerability, where, if used perfectly, it can destroy enemies. This also provides the only parry in the game, along with a nice 10-meter dash. The Spear is a really powerful 1v1 weapon with fast CC options that are hard to dodge and can be chained one after the other for a nice trade pattern without you taking any damage. It's also very efficient at zoning people off of you, so you can swap back to that musket for a couple shots. My other 2 recommendations are the Hatchet and the Warhammer. The Hatchet is a very high single target DPS that can win a large amount of trades when Berserk is active and can take advantage of enemies that burn gap closers to get in range of you. Warhammer is a really fun combo because Warhammer is terrible at gap closing and has very long animations that can normally be dodged. However, people are going to want to gap close to you to get you off a musket, and if they get hit with one of your traps, they're now going to be rooted for 3 seconds, and you can take that time to swap to Warhammer and begin the Pound Town CC train for big damage. Next up, 50v50 wars, where I think musket users really shine. Muskets are best at abusing range and have strength in numbers. Getting a firing squad of 5 musket players to focus targets trying to use siege weapons is absolutely deadly to enemies. During wars, whether on offense or defense, you're going to be posting up in the back lines and just peppering enemies while focus targeting anybody trying to use siege turrets. As such, you really won't be involved in the fights and don't need traps. Instead, I recommend damage and stopping power to slow targets while knocking them back. I think this utility option is really handy in wars, but if you just wanted to look for raw damage, feel free to swap this out for Power Shot. Really try working together with your other musket players to snipe kids together for a huge impact. Small note here, if you're on the defending side, you probably want to just stay on the wall the entire war as you're going to have the best range and vantage point from here. For weapon pairings, it's a somewhat weird position where it doesn't really matter too much what your secondary is because your job is going to permanently be on backline using musket. You really shouldn't be a part of any fights or skirmishes, which means that you don't really need a melee weapon as a defensive option. Honestly, if you're performing your role well, maybe you could actually pair this with a bow and utilize poison shot, rain of arrows, and penetrating shot whenever they're off cooldown as just like additional long-range poke options. I could see that being pretty effective as a useful secondary weapon. Finally, for the last build, you're like me. You love New World and enjoy playing all the content in the game, but you don't want to constantly change your build around. Well, look no further because I present to you the one build to rule them all. This build is essentially the same as the solo open world build and provides a good amount of damage, CC for zoning, and mobility with haste. Whether you're chipping away at your enemies in PvP or popping headshots on ads, this build will help you maximize that damage output while you stay a safe distance away. And if enemies start to get too close, you have your trusty traps laid down ready and waiting. A fun combo to try out in PvP or PvE is laying down traps, and then as soon as the target gets rooted, go into shooter stance and pop 3 headshots before they have a chance to move or dodge. For weapon pairings, I gotta recommend either the rapier or the spear. Both scale off dexterity and complement the musket in their own unique ways. The rapier provides extremely high damage and mobility with a large outplay potential utilizing iframes. This is the riskier playstyle that can offer the higher rewards. The spear is the safer option that dispatches enemies through strong CC chains. Enemies won't get a chance to hit you back because they're going to be lying on the ground from all the stuns and knockdowns, which is going to allow for some awesome trades in your favor. Whether you choose the rapier or the spear, if you land a few good shots with the musket, you can get your targets so low from such a large distance that their only 2 options are going to be to run away from you in fear or to run at you and accept death by your secondary weapon. That's going to wrap up the musket, everybody. As always, huge shout out to Mike for being the best green punching bag a man could ever ask for. And just a little side note for you guys, I got a COVID test. This is not COVID. Woohoo, big success there. It's just a terrible bug. Hopefully it goes away over the next couple of days and my videos can start getting a little more energetic and a little less nasally. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys are going out there and ready to pop some headies. Love you guys, appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.